My dad always preached honesty, while secretly hooking up with a girl 20 years younger than him. While Mom trusted his late meetings, he was building a second life behind our backs. And then one day, she showed up at our doorstep. What happened next? It was the beginning of the end for all of us, and it started right at that moment. You know that feeling when your life suddenly takes a turn and you're like, what the heck is even happening? Well, that was me. My name's Danny, I'm 18. My dad, Joe, 45, always seemed like one of those guys who's just living life on autopilot. You know the type. Wakes up, pours his coffee, heads to work, comes home, and watches the same boring TV shows every night. Typical dad stuff, right? At least that's what I thought. Until everything blew up, and not just anywhere, but right inside our house. So it all kicked off when I randomly saw him at this fancy restaurant after school. I was just passing by, grabbing a burger or whatever, when, bam, there's my dad sitting with some woman. And let's be real here, she was definitely not my mom. First of all, she looked way too young for him, like she could be my older sister or something. And my first thought, dude, what in the world is going on? I squinted, trying to figure out if maybe she was a colleague or some work thing. But then I saw him stroking her hand and whispering in her ear. Well, there it is. No way this was just business. My insides twisted, and I just stood there, frozen, watching my dad play Romeo while his Juliet was chilling at home. The next day, I was ready to confront him. Give him the whole, what's your deal speech. But instead, he comes up to me with this serious look and sits down next to me on the couch. I thought, oh, great, here we go, the father-son talk. And guess what? I was right. He looks at me with his classic dad face, takes a deep breath and says, look, Danny, I know what you saw yesterday, but there are things in life that aren't as simple as they seem. Please keep this to yourself, all right? You're not going to understand everything yet. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My dad, the one who always gave me those lame talks about honesty, now he's asking me to lie for him, like I'm some accomplice in his little secret affair. He paused, as if waiting for me to agree, and then added, sometimes, to keep things simple, you just gotta stay quiet. You get that, right? Get that? Seriously, it took everything in me not to burst out, have you lost your mind? Sure, staying quiet might be easy for someone living a double life, but I wasn't about to be dragged into his mess. It was like one of those moments in movies where they ask you to keep your mouth shut, but deep down, you know if you do, you'll just become part of the lie. That moment was a turning point for me. I realized what I'd seen was only the beginning, and soon enough, this whole thing would spiral into a full-blown nightmare for everyone involved. All right, so things were getting hotter than I'd ever imagined. I wasn't trying to play spy or anything, but let's be real. I needed to figure out just how deep my dad was in this mess. Turns out, what I saw wasn't a one-time thing. Nah, this wasn't some random lunch. He was constantly meeting up with her. And the worst part, this friend of his wasn't just some casual fling. Oh no, she was way too polished. Like way out of his league. You know when someone's too good to be real and you just know something's fishy? Yeah, that was her. Now, look, everyone has their quirks, right? But this was next level. I'm talking straight up falling in love with a movie star vibes. And while he was out there playing Casanova, back home he kept up the whole perfect family man act. My mom, Linda, 42, sweet as can be, had no clue what was going on behind the scenes. And you know what's messed up? He still had the nerve to whisper to her every morning how much he loved her. Like, come on, dude. You can't run two lives like this. Even double agents slip up. I started to feel like a pressure cooker, ready to explode. Watching him act all normal at home while I knew the truth, it was like some twisted reality show that only I was in on. And trust me, it wasn't fun being the only one in the audience. Every time I saw my mom smile, my stomach twisted because I knew it was all built on lies. And what about those late nights at work? Yeah, no. Spoiler alert, they weren't work. While Mom thought he was hustling for the family, he was actually off on cozy dinners with his not-so-secret work colleague. Picture this, romantic lighting, maybe even some jazz in the background, while Mom's at home folding laundry and thinking she's married to a saint. I started shaking every time I thought about it. Not because I was scared, but because I was mad, furious. I was living with this massive secret that was eating me alive, and my dad, he was just coasting, living the double life like it was no big deal. Meanwhile, I was stuck being the only one who knew the truth, and that truth, it was suffocating. I felt like a hostage in my own home, trapped between two realities, the one my mom believed and the one my dad was desperately trying to hide. And here's the kicker. The more I watched, the worse it got. It wasn't just occasional meetups anymore. They were getting closer, and it was obvious this wasn't some casual fling. Nope. Dad was in deep, and I was drowning in the weight of it all, knowing that any minute, this ticking time bomb was going to blow up our entire lives. I couldn't take it anymore. Every second felt like I was sitting on a bomb, and any minute, it was going to blow up in my face. One night, when my dad pulled his usual working late stunt again, I stayed home with my mom. She was in her element, whipping up our favorite dinner, her signature dumplings that always smelled like pure nostalgia. But this time, they didn't taste right. They were bitter, like the mess swirling around in my head. She sat across from me, happily chatting about how much she loved our family, how everything felt perfect. And me? I just sat there, stone-faced, thinking, when does this fairy tale turn into a nightmare? I was on the edge, ready to spill the whole truth. My mind was racing, my heart pounding. I'd played out this conversation in my head 100 times. How I'd tell her, how she'd react, and what would happen next. And then, right as I was about to drop the bombshell, ding-dong, the doorbell rings. I stood up, opened the door, and my stomach dropped. Standing there, like a ghost from my worst nightmare, was her. The woman my dad's been sneaking around with. My heart started pounding so hard, I thought it might burst right through my chest. She mumbled something like, "Hi, I'm here to see Joe. Is he home? Excuse me, what?" She had the audacity to show up at our house. I was frozen, gripping the door like it was the only thing keeping me from losing it completely. And just as I was trying to process what the hell was going on, my mom walked over, probably curious why I was just standing there like an idiot. She stopped dead in her tracks when she saw the woman. Their eyes met. And in that moment, it was like time stopped. You could practically hear the sound of everything we thought was real crumbling down. My mom didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The look on her face said it all. It was that quiet, bone-chilling moment when reality hits you like a truck. The woman, clearly sensing she just stepped into the wrong movie, stammered out something like, sorry, I must have the wrong place. But we all knew that was a lie. My mind was screaming, "This is it! The truth is out!" But I was too stunned to even speak. I was done holding it in. My nerves were shot, and the pressure inside me finally exploded. It was like I'd been sitting on this ticking time bomb for too long, and now, well, it was going off. I started spilling everything to my mom like a maniac, every single detail, all the sneaky meetups, the fake work-late excuses, the whole twisted charade. How Dad had been playing us all this time, and oh yeah, how he'd tried to guilt-trip me into keeping his dirty secret. Mom just stood there, staring at me, her face slowly draining a color, like someone had just punched her in the gut. I swear, I've never seen her look so broken. For a second, I thought she was going to lose it. Yell at me, cry, something. But no, she didn't snap at me. She didn't scream or throw things like you'd expect in some dramatic movie scene. Instead, she just turned around and walked away, straight to her room, silent. I was left standing there in the hallway, alone with her, the home-wrecking mystery woman. She didn't know what to do either. Talk about awkward. She started sputtering some lame excuses like, "I didn't know Joe was married." "Oh, please spare me. Lady, you're either blind or a really, really bad liar. The whole town knows he's married." I was boiling inside, like a high school kid who's about to throw down in the cafeteria. I was this close to losing it. But instead, I just glared at her, my fists clenched so hard I thought I might crack the doorframe. She got the hint, though, and made herself scarce real quick. Like poof, she was out of there. A couple hours later, Dad finally strolls in, acting like nothing's happened. Just another day in the life of a working man. Little did he know, the hammer was about to drop. And oh boy, did it drop. Mom was waiting for him at the front door, standing there like a boss, and right next to her, his stuff, packed and ready to go. No tears, no shouting, just pure, icy calm. "Here's your stuff. Leave," she said, as cold as the Arctic. Dad's face went pale. He didn't even get a chance to argue, explain, or whatever he thought he was going to do. She didn't need to explain herself either. The message was crystal clear: game over, dude. And just like that, he was out. Just when I thought this family drama couldn't get any messier, turns out, my dad's little love affair wasn't just blowing up our house. It was blowing up his career, too. Yeah, the guy managed to turn his entire life into a dumpster fire, and it was burning fast. So here's the kicker. Not only was the home situation hitting peak meltdown, but his little side project also dragged his job down the drain. Turns out, his girlfriend wasn't just some random lady. Nope, she worked at the same company. Yeah, you heard that right, same company. The dude really thought he could mix business with, well, you know. And like every bad decision, it didn't stay a secret for long. It's funny how these things work, right? One domino falls, and next thing you know, the whole tower's collapsing. Word got out around the office. People talk, and in this case, they were talking a lot. Gossip spreads like wildfire, and by the time it reached the higher-ups, my dad's reputation had taken a nosedive. Honestly, I don't know what's funnier, him thinking no one would find out, or the fact that he actually believed he could juggle all this without dropping everything. But the company? Yeah, they didn't find it funny at all. Corporate doesn't exactly love it when their employees turn the office into a soap opera. So, after a brief chat with HR, let's just say my dad found himself in a pretty awkward position. The official reason? Unprofessional conduct. The real reason? Dude couldn't keep his personal life from crashing into his professional one. Imagine this, a guy who used to stroll into work all confident, thinking he had it all figured out. And now? Now he's being walked out of the building with a cardboard box filled with the remnants of his so-called career. Talk about ironic. He couldn't balance his two lives, and now both of them were falling apart right in front of him. Honestly, it's poetic justice, if you ask me. He spent all this time building his perfect image at home and work, only to have it crumble in spectacular fashion. You ever seen someone try to juggle too many things and suddenly everything crashes to the floor? Yeah, that was him right there. So there he was, jobless, homeless, well, almost, and his girlfriend probably rethinking the whole relationship now that he's not exactly the office big shot anymore. So now, picture this. My dad, the once family man who thought he had it all, is officially screwed. No job, no respect, and now, no roof over his head. The house we lived in? Legally, it belonged to Mom. She had the papers, the lawyers, the receipts. And my dad? Well, let's just say his smooth operator days were over. At first, he tried to play it cool, you know. He came to Mom trying to negotiate like he's still got some cards to play. Maybe I can just stay in the basement? Yeah, the basement, bro. Like he was bargaining for a rental spot in his own house. But Mom, she wasn't having it. She was ice cold, like straight out of a cop show cold. If you're leaving for good, she told him, like she was reading the last line of a courtroom drama. And Dad, not ready to give up his throne, or in this case, the basement, tried to pull the classic bluff. I'll take this to court. You won't keep me out of the house I paid for? Dude, seriously? This guy couldn't even pay for dinner on his last date, let alone a lawyer to take on my mom. Her legal team was way ahead of him. They shut that down real quick. His whole tough guy act crumbled the second he realized he had nothing. No leverage, no job, no backup plan. So, yeah, in less than a week, my dad went from being the guy with the perfect life to standing outside with his bags like some lost tourist. No home, no job, and no family to fall back on. But, hey, at least he still had his girlfriend, right? Wrong. Turns out, his lady friend wasn't exactly signing up for the broke and homeless lifestyle. Once she found out he was jobless, things got awkward fast. No more fancy dinners, no more dates at expensive restaurants. Just him, unemployed and looking like a total mess. I heard through the grapevine that she wasn't sticking around to play the supportive partner role. Surprise, surprise. Guess the romance fizzles when your guy's career is dead in the water. And just like that, my dad was alone. Completely. Stranded in the middle of his own self-made disaster. Homeless, jobless, and girlfriendless. All that was left? A guy who thought he could juggle it all, now struggling to keep his head above water. So here's the thing. Life didn't exactly become sunshine and rainbows after we kicked Dad to the curb. Yeah, we were free from his lies and all that drama, but it wasn't like we woke up the next day living in some fairy tale. It was rough. Mom was a wreck for a while, juggling bills, trying to figure out how to manage everything now that we didn't have two incomes coming in. She was constantly stressed, like running on a never-ending loop of anxiety. But you know what? Even with all that, I could see her starting to breathe again. Like for the first time in years, she wasn't carrying the weight of a fake marriage. I felt like I'd dragged us out of this deep pit of lies, like I had been the one to pull the trigger on this whole charade and blow it sky high. And honestly, I didn't regret a thing. Sure, things were messy, emotionally and financially, but sometimes you've just got to set the whole place on fire to rebuild. And boy, did we set it on fire. As for Dad, oh, he didn't just vanish into the ether. Nah, he tried a couple of times to pop back into our lives, all "I'm so sorry" and "I didn't mean to hurt you guys." Typical stuff, right? Like, dude, you set this whole mess in motion and now you're asking for a do-over? Please. Every time he showed up, Mom and I just looked at each other like, is this guy serious right now? He'd pull the classic "I've changed" card, but we weren't buying it. Not anymore. It's funny though, you'd think I'd feel bad about blowing up his whole life, but nah. Every time I saw him trying to worm his way back in, all I could think was, you did this to yourself, man. No sympathy, no second chances. He had his shot, and he blew it big time. Mom was tougher than I gave her credit for. After a while, she got her groove back, started focusing on herself, making moves to rebuild. It was like she'd finally woken up from this long, crappy dream and realized there was more to life than living with a guy who couldn't even be honest with her. She didn't need him. We didn't need him. And me? I wasn't about to look back and feel guilty for anything. Yeah, it was chaotic, but in the end, it was worth it. We were better off without him. I knew that. Mom knew that. And as far as Dad was concerned, he was just going to have to live with the consequences of his own choices. And just like that, Dad disappeared from our lives as fast as he'd blown it all up by. One day, he was causing chaos. The next, he was gone. Poof. Like he never even existed. Honestly, it was kind of poetic. He wrecked everything and then just faded into the background, like some character in a bad TV show that gets written off mid-season. Now, his life's a sad shadow of what it used to be. The guy who once strutted around like he had it all figured out is now a ghost. People know him, sure, but no one talks about him. He's become one of those stories people whisper about at reunions, "Oh, remember Joe? Yeah, whatever happened to him?" And then they just move on with their lives because he's not even worth a conversation anymore. Meanwhile, I learned one cold, hard truth. Sometimes you just gotta burn everything to the ground and walk away. There's no fixing some things, no happy ending for liars and cheats. It's better to tear it all apart and start over than live in a house of cards, waiting for the wind to blow it down. That's what Dad didn't get. He tried to play both sides, live in two worlds, but in the end, both worlds collapsed, and there he was, standing in the rubble, wondering what the hell happened. As for me, I don't regret a thing. You live and you learn, right? And what I learned is that it's better to face the ugly truth head on than pretend everything's fine when it's not. Dad couldn't handle that. He built a life on lies, and eventually, those lies caught up to him. It was bound to happen. Now, when I think about him, it's not with anger or sadness. It's more like indifference. He's just a part of the past now, like an old scar you don't really notice anymore. Sure, it's there, but it doesn't hurt. Not anymore. So yeah, that's the final note. He's gone, we've moved on, and life's a whole lot better without the weight of his lies dragging us down.